On March 11th, 2021, a user named Sabrina Miller 230 posted an eerie image on Instagram. It was her first post. Well, for whatever reason, it was also her second post. No descriptions, no hashtags, just two posts of the same eerie image that, for some people, may bring back vivid memories of that Jeff the Killer creepypasta I once covered. See the resemblance in the eyes? However, unlike Jeff, who was definitely a fictional character, Sabrina Miller presents herself as being real. In fact, Sabrina displays a wide range of emotions throughout her posts on Instagram. Except, she says that she isn't human. What exactly is she then? Well, you might be surprised at the answer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Sabrina Miller to find out who or what she is. Great day. I helped my friend Barry a bit with his depression. He sent me some photos of him when he was younger, in his living room with his mom cleaning. Some photos of him celebrating his birthday. I reminded him of the nostalgia and to remember good times away in the future. I've always been so scared to interact with people. Ever since Richard, I have felt so used by your kind. But I'm trying to adapt. The closest friend I had was John, but I can't find him after he moved away. Sabrina made this post later the same day, and she mentions a few people. Barry seems to be a person that Sabrina is getting to know, even though she says she's always been scared to interact with people, quote, ever since Richard. Whoever this Richard was, he seems to have ruined her trust in our kind. She also mentions John as being the closest friend she had. Right off the bat, we can tell there's something fishy about Sabrina Miller. It's not only the fact that she writes as if she isn't human, but the grainy image is clearly not human. Similar to the first picture, her pupils are tiny dots. Her eyebrows appear to be painted on. In fact, she looks like a mannequin. Sabrina posts one more image that day, this time without the grainy film quality. You can see how smooth her skin is, and how it doesn't have any pores. The lips look like plastic, and the nostrils are sealed instead of having holes. Clearly, these are images of a mannequin, but how exactly are her facial expressions changing so drastically across images? Even the eyes are looking in different directions. I imagine this would be extremely creepy for anybody who discovered Sabrina's Instagram during her first day. Little did they know that things would get even stranger. Sabrina's next post is over a week later, on March 20th. She looks happy, hanging out with my friend Barry. We met on this social interaction platform. He said he finds my profile photograph to be interesting. The hashtags include photography and photo of the day, which imply that the image was taken with a camera instead of an image that may have been manipulated with a program like Photoshop. Interestingly, despite the nose, lips, eyes, and mouth looking fake, we can see some skin details here, like the bumps on her cheek and the wrinkles around her mouth that make her seem real. Is this actually a photograph? For anyone following Sabrina's first post, things have definitely been curious up to this point. But Sabrina's jolly demeanor adds a sense of levity that offsets the eerie nature of her profile. However, Sabrina's next post takes a sudden turn. That would be the first sign of Sabrina's darker side. Sometimes I have to remember to cry tears, not blood. For some reason, I always mix up the two. Sometimes it feels weird to release a liquid from my face. I usually have no emotion, but I have some sadness. My friend Barry has been feeling worse. I wish I could take his pain away. To make matters even stranger, her hashtags include the words hungry, thirsty, and yummy, which seem to have nothing to do with the image or the description. While these words may seem out of context right now, we'll soon discover their relevance. Sabrina's next post reveals a key detail about her that helps explain her strange appearance, as well as some of the twisted things she has posted. One fun fact about me: I can grow my hair to any length and shade I want. When I first arrived on this planet, I went with shoulder-length hair, then quickly went to long. Sabrina claims to be from another planet. I'm sure you can tell that from this point on, things will only get weirder. Hi. Sometimes I like to sit in the dark. I think about Richard a lot. I used to be so afraid of the dark. If it was not for him, I wouldn't have found this wonderful place. But there was a price. Silver lining, I guess. Plus, I learned how to use light in my eyes to see, and I guess you could call that dope. What an odd word. Sabrina's mention of using light in her eyes may seem confusing for now, but it'll eventually make sense as more and more information about her becomes revealed. Sabrina goes on to discuss how she had visions of the past and future when she first came to Earth. She wanted to find somebody to embody. One day she saw a mannequin head that made her feel happy, so she ultimately decided to embody that. This explains Sabrina's appearance, but what does she mean by embody? Her next post takes another dark turn. Wearing a mask with red stains that look like blood. Sabrina writes, "Sad. I wanted to live here, on this planet, as a friend, but your kind became too interested in the things I could do and the magic I performed. It makes me sad because I originally was invited here for the purpose of friendship and in hopes to learn from each other. But I was the only one giving, never receiving. I'll be okay. Sometimes depression hits me for a little bit." It's clear that Sabrina's emotional state is not stable. It's also clear that some event in her past has caused her to be this way. Just what happened to her? In her next two posts, she uses the hungry hashtag again. There's clearly something odd going on here. My friend Barry has told me he has feelings for me. This makes me feel excited for the future. Maybe a different outcome this time around. As I've said before, John is someone who was a close friend, but never in a relationship way. But I still love him. I saved him, and in many ways, he saved me. Things start to look positive for Sabrina. She's excited for a change. It is official. I have a date tomorrow. Now I must look pretty. On my planet, there is no need to look pretty. We are all an extension of each other, so it was never a necessity. That being said, I respect that your species are filled with ego, and I will abide by the rules. Sabrina is definitely strange, but we're starting to understand her a bit better. She seems to be from a place where everyone, or perhaps everything, is part of some sort of collective consciousness. Being on Earth, she is able to have feelings for a change. This is probably a welcoming experience for her. I mean, imagine spending your life attached to a group of other entities, sharing their life experiences, sharing their emotional states, like some sort of hive mind. Then, all of a sudden, you've departed to a new world, where each individual is an expression of themselves and what they choose to be. This is the ultimate form of freedom that is probably overwhelming for Sabrina, which could explain the emotional roller coaster she has experienced. Her next post explains a bit more about her past. Did my makeup, and on my way to his house. From 1954 to about 1955, I was in the care of my old friend Richard. So when I was finally able to live on my own, I didn't know what to do. I mostly just stayed at abandoned houses, not feeling much of anything, except falling in love with nature. The only pure thing left on this rock. Now that I am feeling what true love is, I cannot grasp the feeling. I want to cry, but I want to scream with joy. But I shouldn't do that, as my scream is known to sound like a threatened cat, which I've heard scares people. It's clear that Sabrina has been around for a long time. We can see that she doesn't age like a normal person. She explains how she stayed at abandoned houses once she was no longer living with Richard. How she fell in love with nature, calling it the, quote, only pure thing left on this rock. And she claims to be feeling, quote, what true love is. It seems odd that Sabrina would say this is true love for someone she has only spoken to on the internet. But when you consider that Sabrina's emotional intelligence is closer to that of a teenager, it makes more sense. This could be one of the first times she actually has a crush on someone. Whoever this Barry person is, they seem to be having a positive effect on her. At least it seemed that way, until they actually met. When he saw me, he said he was scared of me. He said I looked artificial. I did my best to look pretty, but I guess it wasn't enough. I hoped he would have let me in, but the door remained locked. I stood there for 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 17 seconds before leaving. He loved me when I helped him through his problems, when I listened to him when nobody else would or could. I even tried to form a calming figure to help him through his nightmares. He ran away from me then, and he ran away from me now. I was being used by him just like I was Richard. Your kind are so cruel. I will take note of this. I never really interacted with humans besides Richard. I would live amongst everyone, keeping to myself. Now I wish I would have stayed in the woods, where the animals and plants never judge. I miss John. Sabrina falls back into her depressed state. We can see how she's tipping over the edge in her next post. I had carved our names on this tree with my bare hands, and this is how I get treated? I helped you through your nightmares, and even tried to help you by giving you a protector. Yet you ran from it then, and you run from me now. Everything I do, you hate. I just wanted to help you. She lists the crying hashtag 10 times, showing her unstable state. And we can see that she's back to using that hungry hashtag again too. Sometimes I want to go back home, and I can go back whenever I want. But maybe I'm selfish. I like the feeling of being independent. Back home, I was always stuck with everyone else. I never mattered. But here, I can be my own person. Hashtag here, hashtag I, hashtag M, hashtag hungry, hashtag excited, hashtag love is a lie, hashtag angry, hashtag angry, hashtag angry, hashtag angry, hashtag angry, hashtag angry, she lists in her next post. And then, it happens. Me and Barry talked today. He said he was sorry. Did I forgive him? Of course not. Forgiveness is not my nature, only hunger. I could try to learn forgiveness, but my anger is too high to even begin to fathom that concept. Now I know I shouldn't be like this with everyone, and I won't. I do know a lot of you truly are caring, but I just have a hard time trusting people when people lie, or judge me because I don't fit a certain standard. Sabrina's face displays a smirk of satisfaction, and her post contains the hashtags, he tasted good. Now we can see her true self. Quote, forgiveness is not my nature, only hunger. While Sabrina may present herself as a happy, lighthearted entity, it's clear that she has a dark, sinister side to her. Sabrina is a predator, disguised as something not quite human, but not quite alien enough for people to immediately fear her. She'll express this even more in future posts when she describes her true form. Now that Sabrina is satiated, her posts seem normal again. In fact, she even mentions a video call with another Instagram user named Anita Tapio, who often poses as a doll with green hair. Then, out of the blue, something vile appears on her profile. my molting has finished. The one downside to taking the form of something I'm not is having to shed. Once again, we are reminded that there's more to Sabrina than the young woman she is impersonating. Her next post is even more repulsive. I've learned that your species is a fan of art. Well, I decided to do some crafts with my molted skin. I call this art piece The Pretty Girl Everyone Loved and Was Friends With Forever. Sabrina does nothing to hide this alien side of her. In fact, she clearly embraces it. With nothing to hold her back, she seems to be derailing once more. Over a month goes by with no posts. Then, on June 13th, suddenly the hungry hashtag returns, and she claims to be meeting a new friend later. Is she going out to eat someone else? 3 days later, we find out, and it turns out to be something even worse. Sadly, one of my friends wasn't helping, so my 2 friends who are left over will be coming home with me to be studied. They were so excited, maybe in a bad way, but I tried to reassure them that they will be taken good care of. Ever since some parts of my family wanted to be independent like me, they wanted to learn how to blend with you all, and that will take studying. Sabrina seems to be setting the stage for an invasion of her species. Taking people to her planet to be studied seems to be the first steps in her plan. A month later, she posts, "A storm is brewing," with a picture of a cloudy sky. While on the surface, this seems to be literal, there also seems to be a double meaning to it, because it is at this point that her posts become really unhinged. Her next post is a picture with blood all over her mouth. Thirst quenched. Back at home, we consumed a sort of organic material to stay alive. And here on this planet, it appears there are many organic forms to choose from. Another reason some of my family wants to come here too. Following this, Sabrina shares how she, quote, gorged out way too much to celebrate surpassing 200 followers. Once again, with a picture of her covered in blood. At this point, I'm sure you get the idea that there's a lot to Sabrina. Her posts range from daily activities to more explanations of her feelings about being on Earth and her experiences among humankind. From this point on, some of these posts will be skipped in order to focus on the more important ones. But if you're interested in everything Sabrina shares, feel free to visit her Instagram after this video. Among all of her posts, a few stand out as being key details to Sabrina's nature. I tried to have one of my family members take a photo of me turning into my true form, but sadly, this was the only thing it captured. Polaroids captured it better. Digital cameras get it all messed up. My face sort of changed, but not enough. It's clear that Sabrina has already brought more members of her species to Earth. She's also experimenting with her true form. Remember how she talked about embodying a mannequin? You see, Sabrina possesses shape-shifting capabilities. Kind of reminds you of those conspiracy theories about shape-shifting reptilian aliens living among us. Except Sabrina's true form doesn't seem to be reptilian, although it may not even be classified by human standards. After all, her true form is something that doesn't exist in our world. At this point, Sabrina goes over 6 months without posting anything. She begins posting strange things with more frequency. She makes another attempt at capturing her true form with a picture, but ends up posting a blurry mess instead. She shares another image of her molting. She also seems to be back to eating humans, though she probably never stopped. My roommate's landlord heard sounds of a screaming cat, but it was just me. He got very agitated, so I removed his doorknob and will be paying him a visit tonight to show him how I make those sounds. As if confirming the suspicion, the following month, on August 8th, Sabrina posted a wanted image with a sketch of her face. Old news clip of me on the television set. Whoever sketched me like this did me dirty. It's clear that Sabrina has been discovered and the police are after her. By this time, she'd probably committed countless murders, though we're unsure exactly how they found out what she looked like, especially if she eats her victims. Maybe someone saw her and provided a description, or maybe a glimpse of her was caught on camera. Either way, the fact she is wanted doesn't hinder her actions. They aren't cold. None of them get cold. They inevitably become room temperature, a fact that I was horribly mistaken on. I always thought they became cold. Still, so much to learn. While it isn't expressly stated, we're assuming she's talking about the corpses of the people she kills. You know how they refer to corpses as being cold once they have died? While we understand that they're referring to the warmth of the body heat, Sabrina seems to take it literally. She seems to be killing more frequently now, as her very next post 2 days later is about another rampage. I couldn't control my hunger last night. They didn't deserve what happened to them. Why do you have to taste so good? My species eats organic matter, and that typically was organisms that had no physical form. But this just tastes so much better. Being at home for the length of time I was, I forgot how to control my emotions again. But I'm trying. We can also see how her expression is more alien now, with her eyes being tiny pupils like her very first post on Instagram. There is one post that Sabrina shares a few days later that stands out. It's this image where her eyes are different. I broke into a hippie's house and her and her friends gave me psychedelics. And now, we are all best friends. She claims to be under the influence of psychedelics. However, it's clear that this is the very first image of her out of all of her posts where a real human face is being shown. I mean, let's face it, we would be hard-pressed to believe that all of this is actually real. An alien posting on Instagram, an alien going rampant, killing people, shape-shifting into a mannequin-looking person, and going about their business all while making it public on social media. If you haven't noticed by now, it's clear that this is all some sort of ARG. What really is amazing is just how much thought and detail have been put into this. Not just the writing, but also the imagery. Whoever is bringing Sabrina into the world clearly has a high level of dedication and skill. Which is why more and more people are flocking to her profile and following her story. But this is exactly why this post stands out. In this post, Sabrina's face looks human. One of her eyes is clearly human. Her skin is dirty, her hair looks real. Her nose has a different shape and looks organic. The only thing that looks edited is her large eye. For now, keep this in mind, as we'll be returning to it later on with some speculation as to its relevance. This seems like a good time to go on a tangent from Sabrina's Instagram in order to cover a recurring detail throughout our story. That is, the person named Richard. One of Sabrina's earlier posts from July 18th contained a picture of an old letter. The first human contact I've made was a real sweet person at first. He made a mistake on the date due to his anxiety over his girlfriend who left him. His downfall. I like to trace over it with charcoal every day. It makes me feel like I'm closer to him again. He is dearly missed. But you know what they say, it had to be you. This letter is from Richard Williams. The reason Richard is relevant is because his story explains the origins of Sabrina and how she arrived on Earth. His story can be found in one of the links on Sabrina's profile, It's a blog that contains uploads of Richard's journal from 1954. The journal is written from Richard's perspective, and it begins with a mention of something he invented called the Infinity Box. Apparently, this is the device that Richard used to make contact with a being from another planet. Richard says that he sent our English alphabets and some dictionaries to help it learn fast. At first, the noises the entity would make sounded like a dying cat or a low-toned growl. However, after he sent the dictionaries, he could sense the speech changing, and soon, they began to communicate. Throughout the journal, Richard expresses how his love, a woman named Catherine, left him. As a result, he has been fully occupied communicating with this entity to the point where he has lost track of things. Roughly 20 days after making first contact, the entity arrived on Earth to visit him. Having the capability to shapeshift, it took a humanoid form that was neither male nor female. After meditating for a while, it decided that it felt like a woman. Richard provided a book of common names, and it chose a name that it liked the most: Sabrina Miller. And thus, Sabrina Miller was born. This was Sabrina's first time being in another world, apart from her species. Remember, her planet is composed of entities that are all entangled. She has no individual consciousness over there. But over here, she can be herself. She's no longer tied to the collective. She's experiencing things for the first time, like speaking to Richard, being in nature, and taking a form of her own. On the other hand, Richard seems to be some kind of scientist. He invents things. He called Sabrina to our world. And little did she know, he was testing her. Over the next few days, Richard would take Sabrina to a few different locations. Included are some Polaroid pictures he had taken around that time. When he took her to the lake, he pushed her into the water to test her ability to change form. He quickly regretted this. As he says, quote, "She was ghastly." We can see from the picture that she looks like some sort of blob. Her body had melted into the lake. Then she became hard as a rock, trying to move with the water and trying to match the form of it. According to Richard, she shrieked a sound that was like a mix between a dying cat and the moans of a humpback whale. The next test occurred when Richard took her through a dark forest. The dark scared her, but she was quickly able to adapt, discovering that she could harness a form of light and direct it from her eyes. This led to her excitement, as she was discovering new things about herself each day. One day, Sabrina took Richard's own form. He said it was like looking into a mirror. This may have been the trigger for the suffering that Richard put Sabrina through, which caused her to lose trust in humanity. Remembering his lost love, Catherine, he asked Sabrina if she could take her form. Unfortunately, without any pictures or references, the form she tried to take based on his descriptions were, quote, the most hideous faces that Richard had ever seen. Despite this, we can see that Richard will not give up. Quote, "I must find a photo of her for reference and do later tests," he writes at the end of the journal entry. As they spent more time together, Richard began to notice that Sabrina demonstrated a wide range of emotions: sadness, anger, and even happiness. Whenever she lashed out in anger, Richard found it terrifying. This was a creature capable of carving through the bark of a tree with her bare hands. Quote, "She dug her fingers into my oak table like it was soft butter," he said at one point. She explained to Richard that on her planet, there were no feelings. Everything existed as part of a unified whole, and that the planet itself was an extension of her. However, here on Earth, the emotions she was experiencing were very real. In fact, she had never truly experienced emotions before. She possessed an emotional immaturity like that of a teenager, which resulted in the volatile and impulsive nature visible in her Instagram posts. Over time, Sabrina continued to learn more and more. One day, she even told Richard that she likes him. Richard didn't know how to respond. Quote, "I don't think I could have feelings for something that looks as ghastly as she does," he writes. However, despite how she felt about Richard, deep down, she was feeling used. Eventually, this would get even worse, especially since Richard's tests took some dangerous turns. Richard decided to test her pain tolerance, and it was quite drastic by human standards. Some of these tests would outright kill a person. For instance, on one occasion, he stabbed her in the chest with a butcher knife. On another occasion, he shot her in the face with an M1903 Springfield. He even went so far as to pluck out her eyes. He beat her with a hammer and cut the skin off her arm with a razor blade. What he noticed, in all cases, she regenerated immediately and felt no pain whatsoever. Not only that, but there was no blood. And here's where things get really weird. Richard claims that he showed her footage of tests he had done on other people so that she could see how blood comes out of the body. Just what kind of tests are we talking about here? Had Richard killed people? Was he some sort of sadistic murderer on the loose? Could this be one of the reasons that Sabrina thinks it's okay to go out and eat people? Perhaps Richard's influence on her has conveyed the wrong impression of our species, causing her to have feelings of hate much deeper than her sense of feeling used. Sabrina began to sneak out. She wanted to explore the world on her own, and she expressed her frustration at how Richard would limit her ability to roam free. Richard got angry and tried to send her back to her planet through the Infinity Box. This triggered Sabrina, causing her to take a stiff form like an oak tree, planting herself into the ground as she began to growl for days. It got to the point where Richard had to leave due to the noise and check into a hotel. When he returned, Sabrina was gone. It was around this time that Richard began to break down psychologically. He was missing his old love, Catherine, and decided to visit her. She made it clear that it was over between them, and there was no chance of getting back together. This angered Richard, but he had other plans. He was able to steal a photo of her before he left. Following this, Richard goes through despair, until one day, about 2 weeks later, Sabrina returns. He played guitar and they sang and talked for hours. He expresses how happy he was and how he plans to show Sabrina the photograph of Catherine to see what kind of exercises they could try. Then, suddenly, the journal ends, with Richard writing a letter to his mom and dad, saying that he has decided to leave the country with his, quote, new friend. Compared to other journal entries, this one feels strange and out of place. For starters, his previous entries document his feelings and experiences, but this one is a note to his family. He also misspells Catherine. He mentions that she doesn't like him anymore, but then he misspells there, when he writes, "There is nothing I can do about that." Another odd detail is how he claims that Sabrina, quote, is very pretty just the way she is, which directly contrasts most of what Richard wrote earlier in the journal, where he repeatedly describes her as ghastly and admitted trying to convince her to take more attractive forms, such as the forms of magazine models and even Catherine's form. This suspicious entry may have been written by Sabrina herself, as no one knows what happened to Richard after this point. In fact, Richard's estate was sold soon after, and Sabrina claims that she was only with Richard until 1955, the same year as this entry. I suspect that Richard was Sabrina's first victim, but that is merely speculation. Sabrina's life after Richard changed drastically. She was alone. She moved from place to place, living in abandoned buildings, and learning more about humanity on her own. Actually, one of her posts explains that she went to high school multiple times. Through the power of electronic archives, I have found some of my old yearbook photos. I arrived on this planet in 1954, and after Richard used me, I began to learn for myself what humans are. And every decade, 1957, 1969, 1977, 1985, 1996, I'd go to a high school to learn how the education system is. Sadly, it's terrible. Instead of teaching children important life tools, they just make them feel bad for not understanding complex equations that they will never use in real life anyway. I only smiled in the 90s photo because I truly loved that time. People seemed nicer and were mean to me for my appearance. Sabrina follows his posts with some images from her time with Richard. She even shares that photograph of Catherine that Richard was able to steal right before his disappearance. Interestingly, the photograph of Catherine has Morse code below it, which translates to, "He needed to let her go." Sabrina's story doesn't end here. In fact, her many experiences ultimately transforms her perspective on humanity, shaping her into a much more positive being. One of the influences that may have contributed to her change was seeing the evil nature of her brother, who is now on Earth. It has come to my attention that my brother has been causing some problems for the human species. I was anonymously sent this photograph from someone who claims this was taken from their brother's phone, who is now missing. I had mentioned this before, and will again clearer. If you hear the name Vinyl Targus in your dreams, do not embrace it. Please run from it. And do not say his name out loud. There is a chance he will answer your call, so please just ignore him. I'm so sorry for all of this. Following this post, she shared more information a week later. Apologies for taking a week off. I realized my brother had done a lot of damage here. I'm disappointed in him. I tried to tell him to be kind, but he is evil. No care for anything, just his own sick pleasures. I hate to do this, but I must remove him. I am no longer playing games. Wherever he is, I will find him, and I have help. I will update you all very soon. 9 days after this, Sabrina posts a happy picture of a Thanksgiving dinner with her friends, where she claims she took care of her brother. Sabrina's brother is not the only antagonist in this story. Sabrina's profile contains 4 links to other sites. 2 of them are her Patreon and a backup account. Then there's Richard's journal. The final link is an unusual one, a whistleblower's blog from June 2023 about a very wealthy family called the Schmidts. This blog details how the family founded a technological enterprise in the early 1960s that grew to become one of the largest and most influential companies in the world. From televisions to telephones, gaming systems to computers, this company was a technological pioneer. Upon his death, the founder passed the business down to his son, Arthur, and that's when things took a turn for the worse. The company allegedly underpaid workers and operated labor sweatshops around the world. They also dumped large amounts of garbage and toxic waste into the oceans. Over the years, they faced numerous fraud charges and were involved in several scandals. Despite all of this, Arthur only received fines instead of facing prison time, thanks to the expert lawyer the company had at its disposal. Arthur's wife, Barbara Schmidt, was another key figure in the story. With the backing of the Schmidt family, she had the financial means to launch her own businesses, selling designer clothes and beauty products. However, The whistleblower reveals that her company engaged in extensive illegal animal and even human testing. To make matters worse, one of her products, a unique birth control pill set, was approved by the company Dr. Charles Voorhees. It was this pill set that caused the most problems for people. See, the way the pill set worked required both pills to be taken. The pills in bottle A contained microscopic parasites that would grow within the human body. These parasites consumed sperm cells. The pills in bottle B functioned to kill the parasites. But what if a person forgot to take pill B? Well, the consequences of this were severe, to the point where leaked emails reveal that even Dr. Voorhees was against it. You may be wondering, what does this have to do with Sabrina Miller? Well, interestingly, it was the Schmidt family who purchased Richard's estate after his disappearance. While going through Richard's notes, they uncovered information about the Infinity Box and Sabrina. This discovery led the Schmidts on a search for Sabrina, who was using the Infinity Box to bring her family to Earth. After a year of searching, they finally found her. Quote, "This technology will be the death for you all," Sabrina warned the Schmidts when they confiscated the Infinity Box. Over the next several decades, the Schmidt family learned to use the box to access Sabrina's planets, extracting natural resources that fueled the creations of their technological innovations. As it turns out, the parasites in the birth control pills were also creatures from Sabrina's planet. So how did the story end? Well, here's a post from Sabrina's Instagram. A rant. I apologize for being absent during my 500 follower celebration. I was being chased by some people who claimed to be higher up. I hid in a mall. They never found me. They wanted to take me away for dealing with some billionaire who apparently has some level of importance to this planet, though I don't know what that is. He used forbidden knowledge to make more money with his wife and snot-nosed son. I was just making things right. The main reason I did this was because he used his technology to put more money in his fat pockets and more food in his fat belly, not to help others in need, while there are people out there digging in their pockets for enough change to buy a loaf of bread and juice for their kids during the holiday season. I have learned that in this world, I do not hate the common man, but hate the man who lacks the common knowledge and care for the very world their feet tread. I'm not perfect. I shouldn't have taken people to my planet to be tested on, but I'm growing. I'm learning from my mistakes. I am trying to be good to this world. Why can't they? It's clear that Sabrina finally put an end to the Schmidt family. Another thing that is clear is that Sabrina's finally learning the difference between good and evil. Up until now, she came across as some sort of predator who simply kills and eats humans without a second thought. But she claims she is trying to be good to this world. There's so much more to Sabrina's story. Over time, she discovers that beets are rich in iron and begins consuming them instead of human flesh and blood. She reveals more details about the downfall of the Schmidts and continues to experience new things, including an intergalactic nightclub she discovered by entering different coordinates into the Infinity Box. The aliens she meets there have been so supportive and accepting of her that she starts to feel at home. That's not to say she has stopped posting disturbing content. Some of the experiences she shares are just as unsettling as her earlier posts. Take, for example, this motivational video she claims came from the meat room.
Yes, you, hurt his people. People who didn't deserve it. Devouring them as a way to suppress your own emotions.
And if you think that's creepy, there's even footage of the meat room giving birth to the video. While there's much more we could explore, there is enough to appreciate who Sabrina is and who she has become. Through her experiences, we've watched her evolve from a newly arrived alien that gorges on human flesh to someone who genuinely cares about humanity and even seeks to help our species. Her story is far from over, and it will be interesting to see where her journey takes her next. Sabrina's profile is definitely one of the stranger ones on Instagram. Upon seeing her images for the first time, what came to mind was AI art. However, Sabrina's Instagram began posting in March 2021. For reference, DALL-E first launched in January 2021, just 2 months prior. But back then, AI art wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, with plenty of image artifacts and defects that were easy to spot. There's also the image quality to consider. Some of the images are grainy or have varying levels of exposure that make them look like they were taken with different cameras. This leads to the conclusion that whoever created these images put a lot of care into the minor details. Any modifications were probably done manually with a tool like Photoshop, which shows a high level of dedication. But why? Why would someone invest so much time and effort into such a strange concept? The story that stands out most is Richard's. It's easy to speculate that there may be a grain of truth to it. Perhaps the creator is a woman who once had a man like Richard in her life who used her, and they created Sabrina Miller as a way to project their experiences and vent their frustrations. Alternatively, the creator could be a man who once had a woman like Catherine in his life. Regardless of the motive behind Sabrina's profile, it's clear that this is not just an ARG, but a work of art. And as they say, art is expression. And Sabrina's story expresses adventure, maturity, and emotional growth. Overall, it's a well-crafted ARG that continues to engage people to this day. And the creator deserves all the praise and recognition for such a passionate project. One of the cool things about the Sabrina Miller ARG is that it is ongoing. It's an ARG that you, as a viewer, could actually interact with through her comments and potentially even influence future outcomes for Sabrina. Just bear in mind that they do get a lot of messages, and some of these messages can be straight up trolling, as we've seen in some of her posts, like this one, or this one. What I mean to say is, if you're going to interact with Sabrina, don't be that kind of person. Whoever's behind Sabrina's page is really talented. They've demonstrated impressive dedication and attention to detail in the imagery for Sabrina, as well as fleshing out her backstory and her emotional growth. If you like the concept and want to read more about Sabrina, you can find a link to her Instagram in the description below. Thanks for watching, and have a good one. Take care, guys.